I just wanted to welcome you to day 4 of the forum,
Yeah.
and it has been just a fantastic week so far. Oh, sorry, if you're muted, if you could mute your line, please. It has been a fantastic week so far. We've been digging into ageism and how all of us can take steps toward a more age-inclusive world. This week, we've heard from experts on how ageism and ableism are intertwined. We learned about campaigns here in the US and abroad that are using language and programming and images to really challenge our societal norms around aging. And we were called to action to identify and change our own internalized and expressed ageism. Yesterday, of course, we heard about the critical importance of intersectionality to this conversation and to the anti-ageism movement, and specifically through the lens of experiences of Black women across the life course. There will be recordings of each of these conversations posted in the portal over the next week, so be sure to check back on each day's session to rewatch those if you missed any. And really, this conversation is about changing ourselves and changing society. And of course, this has to include public policies and programs in our own communities and at the national level too. Too often, generational warfare and paternalistic attitudes about older adults, they have ugly ways of showing up in our public policy discourse. Everything from the greedy geezer trope that you might recall from Social Security conversations 15, 20 years ago, to the okay boomer that has crept into conversations about climate change and beyond today. And that's why ageism is really at the heart of ASA's own policy agenda. Our 4 policy priorities are bridging the digital divide, promoting health equity, fighting climate change, and tackling ageism. That's one of our priorities. We really believe that advocating for age inclusion across all 4 of these areas is essential if we're going to make progress at any level. So today we're going to get a little bit tactical. We have 2 outstanding guests once again who will speak about the importance of advocacy. First, Commissioner Lorraine Cortez Vasquez will share about the Ageless New York campaign as a successful advocacy strategy. And then Meredith Whitmire will share her expert advice on how to be more effective in our own advocacy. So with that, let's get started. I am so pleased to introduce to you Commissioner Lorraine Cortez Vasquez. If you want to spotlight the commissioner. Lorraine Cortez Vasquez is the commissioner of the New York City Department for the Aging, whose mission is to eliminate ageism and ensure the dignity and quality of life of diverse older adults, while also supporting caregivers. The commissioner also serves on the Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board, and she was previously the president and CEO of the Hispanic Federation, which is a network for Latino organizations throughout the East Coast. And of course, she was also the 65th New York Secretary of State. While her work spans corporate government and politics, her heart really lies in her nonprofit work. Welcome, Commissioner. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. What a generous introduction.
So we're excited to hear all about Ageless New York. But before we do that, let's check out a video about the campaign. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you, ASA. I really want to applaud you for having combating ageism as one of your 4 top priorities. It is about 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, when I became commissioner, it was one of my top 3 priorities to combat ageism, fight food insecurity and income insecurity. And those, along with those are still key areas that we need to be looking at and addressing in this whole field of aging. And why is ageism so important? You've had, 2 days or 2 panels, previous panels addressing this with experts. But ageism is one of the last areas of the human rights discrimination that society must stand up against and must denounce, and also create solutions and remedies for it. And one of this, it's no different in my view and in many people's view than the ways we've had to tackle racism and sexism, because it takes many forms, including prejudicial attitudes, discrimination, marginalization, the perpetuation of of stereotypes. And ageism is so insidious and pervasive in our culture and in media. And we see it all around us in all forms of jokes, negative portrayals of older adults in films and in TV, and painfully, even self-deprecation, where women will say, I'm too old for, or if I were younger, I could. And you see all of that, and society condones that. And I remember AARP had a campaign not too long ago where it said for her age, and it was one of the sharpest ways of highlighting the self-deprecation process in ageism. We've been laser focused at the department on fighting ageism. And one of our initiatives included Ageless New York, the campaign, which you just saw a small fragment of, which launched in March last year. And the goal was to challenge people to rethink their own views on aging, to raise awareness about ageism, because most people, like sexism and racism, are in denial that it still exists. And the campaign raised some questions, but also had a call to action. It took 8 real New Yorkers. These were not characters or anything like that. These were 8 real New Yorkers who were active, very much a part of their community, and contributing greatly to their own self-development, but as well as to society as a whole. They included a marathon runner who ran marathons, like 6 marathons, not only nationally, but internationally. My tip my hat to him, who also had done the marathon as a result of a brain injury. I mean, so the stories are very, very poignant stories, and the resiliency and the determinations. A business owner who not only is become a successful business owner, but has given his time to train and mentor new entrepreneurs. Again, that intersectionality, that intergenerational program. A social worker, a nonprofit CEO who started his organization after retirement. He was a public school teacher, and then he started sharing libraries and books with the children and communities in Africa. A dancer who dances with the WNBA dance troupe. And we also had, these are people who are over 60 and they defy stereotypes. And they're not alone. Those are just 8. And there are 1.6 million New Yorkers who represent this age group and who are doing phenomenal things every day. In the ads, we focus on these men and women. They're our neighbors, our co-workers, and they're very much a part of our community, and they contribute to our city and continue to contribute to our city, because that's the other thing is most urban centers and most communities are built by this generation, and we owe them they've earned whatever services and benefits that we provide for them, and they continue to contribute to the economy. There was an article in yesterday's Times that talked about the contributions of older adults. I think it's 69% globally of the economy is based on the 50 plus population. I should share that link with you later on. It was an amazing article. But, we did a PSA, we did bus shelters so that it could be more widely seen. We also did digital sites. We were on Google, Facebook, and all of the social media, where New Yorkers could learn about ageism and also strategies on how to combat ageism, how to give them voices and words and approaches that they can use when they encounter ageism. 2 months ago, we ran another advertisement in our subway systems with the same 8 individuals. Every day you were seeing them on a subway car. So they were exposed to millions of other New Yorkers who could raise the question, what are my attitudes about ageism? There's still so much work to be done. We continue to combat ageism. We continue to work with our city and our city government to make it more equitable and accessible. We've started initiatives. One of the things that we're doing right now is working with the city's major organization, the administration, to train New York workers on what are the issues of ageism so that they can spot them, and making it part of the same way we have sexual harassment training, making it a part of that conversation. But I would say that combating ageism also includes, and I want to just end with this, one of the things that we know is that older adults, 90% of them, when asked, prefer to remain in their community rather than be institutionalized. That is also part of being age inclusive. We need to make neighborhoods, community, and services available so that people could stay in their community, continue to continue to serve. So we laid out a 5-year strategic community care plan where we build in community supports from addressing food insecurity, income insecurity, accessibility, home care, even caregiving services for 5 years to make sure that an older person who wants to stay in their community can. That is how we continue to make sure that we have an age inclusive society. And that is how we continue to combat ageism at all different levels. So I'm open for questions now. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. All right. Okay, we do have a couple of questions coming in. First question, what about including older New Yorkers who have disabilities? Are they part of your campaigns right now?
Right now, they're not. And thank you for mentioning that, because we've been looking at that, and we all have to look at our own biases, right? So we looked at it in terms of transportation, and we said, no, their abilities, all abilities. And so that is one thing that we're definitely considering, in the campaign. So thank you for that prompt, and making us rethink that.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're waiting for other questions, here comes one. Are there any community evaluation strategies in place to see if these efforts are having an impact?
Yes, we are. We're having surveys done. We look at the number of clicks to see the level of engagement once it's in the digital format. So they are.
Excellent. Yeah, and sort of to build on that question, how will you know when this campaign has been effective? What does New York look like?
I think New York continues to look what it looks like, but we will see more older adults staying in the workforce. We will see more young people interested in working in the field of ageism. We think that we will see when we have more housing dedicated to older adults, but in age inclusive developments. If we move to universal design, that will happen naturally and organically. And which is why we've developed an age guide for developers for New York. Because what we don't want is these segregated and separated opportunities. What we want is more and more integration. And if we can influence each one of those fields, whether it's banking, whether it's development, whether it's transportation, all of them, so that they are age inclusive and ability inclusive, then we know that we've succeeded.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I like how you talked about engaging real members of the community, people who are contributing to society, contributing to families, contributing to neighborhoods. I'm wondering if you've learned anything along the way about, what's the most effective way to message to people in the community? Is it the subway ads? Is it the social media? Are there different strategies that work better for different groups?
Now, I think we take in politics, we take a five-prong approach. It's the five areas where individuals engage every day. So it's your supermarket retail, right? It's family and religious, all right? It's social. And then the other one is mass media, like subways and things where people can interact with. So we take those five touch points that people interact with where on most things and use that approach. And obviously, nowadays, not in my days of old campaign development, social media is an integral part of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned some work that you're doing to encourage employers to hire older workers. Could you talk a little bit more about that work?
Sure, we will. There, one of the first things we said was we wanted New York to be an example and to lead by example. So New York funded something that we call Silver Stars. And instead of losing when someone is ready to retire or is retiring from the system, to ensure that we have an age inclusive workforce, city workforce, we have retained those retirees and they can come back with no harm to their pension. And one, there's two benefits. One, you have an age inclusive workforce. Two, you're not losing the talent and the skills that years and years of government and public service experience. And the other thing that you're doing is you're serving as a model for other industries. The other thing that we've done is that we have, through our senior employment program, we acknowledge those employers who have been the most impactful in terms of having age inclusive workforce. We just held a conference in the arena of diversity and inclusion. And to say that, there's a lot of focus on discrimination and racism and sexism. And so we with five leaders in that arena, including the AARP Executive Vice President for Diversity and Equity and Inclusion, to make sure that ageism is part of that portfolio, that it's not just in what we have seen as a DEI portfolio. And so I think it's in all of those ways that we are influencing and trying to change the conversation at the highest levels, but also at the local employer level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. There's a question in the audience, again, kind of shifting back to the Ageless New York campaign. And the question is about, how you're working with the mayor, and if you could speak to the mayor's priorities, and building on that too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the value of a campaign such as Ageless New York in activating local level political leaders. It's, if you have any lessons learned about effective ways to use campaigns like this to really shape the priorities of administrations.
I think there's two ways that we're trying to shape our influence. First of all, the relationship with the mayor is a great relationship. When I came into this agency, the budget was in the high 300s, and now the agency budget is more than 500 million, and it is 500 million, yes, and it is directionally to support these campaigns and the expansion of making New York an age inclusive city to ensure that people can be retained in their communities. So I'm very proud of that direction and the work that's been done, and we, in our 5-year strategic plan, the way we've positioned that is to educate incoming administration as well as incoming city council members. We send them each a part of that strategic plan. We also have been meeting with the incoming city council members, which there are 31 of them, 31 of them are women, but there's more than 31 coming in. We've done incredible, all politics are local and all information is local. And so what we've done is done a microcosm of what aging looks like in their community and the services. And not only did we say what is the current state, but we also said, what are the challenges and the priorities moving forward? Mm-hmm. And we did that graphically as well as verbally. So it's been a way of educating the new members of the legislature, of the city legislature. And we will be doing the same thing at the state level. What we're so proud of with that educational process is those aha moments in the conversations that we've had by borough. New York is broken into 5 boroughs, New York City. And so the legislative bodies are also arrayed by boroughs, even though they'll come together as one big city council. And so that we've had those conversations, not only about their neighborhood, but as well also what's happening in their borough. And you have these aha moments. Oh, I didn't know that, or I didn't see, and it's just educating people early on so that they can become your advocates. And we're looking, and of course, in each one of these sessions, I ask everyone to join the aging committee. And I ask everyone to be the champion for aging in the city of New York.
So you make that explicit call, join us.
It's an explicit request. Yeah.
We've been talking a lot this week about how we talk about aging and about older adults, and really a theme that's running through is shifting the narrative from, oh, this is about them, older adults as them, to really aging is about all of us. And I'm always sort of struck at how, even in the Senate, the average age of our elected officials is very high. Many of them are older adults as traditionally defined, yet they themselves are still having conversations about aging as if it's happening to someone else. Have you had any luck in sort of, shifting that, this is about us when you're talking with...
I think we try to get at that in this campaign. And I think we try to get at that by highlighting people who are doing things that are not uncommon, so that you can show that I think AARP does, and I mean, obviously I'm a AARP former employee, and I admire the work that they do so much. I've worked with them for 7 years proudly, but they've also do things like acknowledging the industry that acknowledges older actors or producers who are producing work about age. And I don't think of it as separate. I think of it no different than we want to see women superheroes. It's about inclusion, and that you are part of every and any conversation that is had. Each one of us started aging from the day we were born. Until about the age of about 37, we thought it was pretty cool. And then it starts shifting between 37 to 45, and then it starts shifting, and then it becomes a negative conversation. We need to change that conversation. I think of Madeleine Albright. Would I ever want a stronger Secretary of State? There's so many people. Dole, who just passed away, their contributions were endless. John Lewis, it's acknowledging their greatness, but also the fact that they were great from a young age and continued that greatness on to their older years.
Yeah. There's lots of work to do to keep pushing that and shift that narrative. Someone is curious who was part of the process for the Ageless New York campaign. Who all was involved?
Older adults. We won't have a conversation about older adults without including older adults in the conversation, including our staff, which is most of them are, many of them are older. And it was, the people in the media, the talents in the art community and the advertising community. And of course, the older adult themselves, they want to be portrayed. The one thing we didn't, the one area that we haven't touched in terms of ageism, which I hope that ASA can tackle, is the ageism that exists in the health field and in health practices. It is alarming to me, and this is something that has been surfaced recently, on how many illnesses or symptoms are dismissed because, oh, that's part of the aging process. Well, I don't know that I want to be looked at that way. I want the attention, the medical attention that I deserve. We saw that happening with women at all, for years. And then we discovered that there was a different way, the way heart attacks manifest themselves in women than they do in men. That is what we need, that same kind of attention in the health field. It's very disconcerting when we start hearing over and over again the number of times. It's like it's part of the aging process.
Right. When we know that the aging process looks so remarkably different for each one of us.
Right. It depends on whether you run or you don't run.
Agreeing. And this, yes, all of that. We have so many questions coming through. I may have to send your office a note, Commissioner, and see if we can get some more Q&As, but we're at the end of this portion. Thank you for joining us.
So much. Thank you.
And to everyone joining us, there are some of the ads, the art from the subway ads featured in the platform that you can take a look at. The link to the spot that we showed is in chat, and we'll post that again.
And we'll also, if you can post the link to the strategic 5-year community care plan, would be also, I think, very beneficial for many people.
Yeah, right? Sure. We're happy to do that.
We'll
get that link from you and share it out. So thank you again, Commissioner, for joining us. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. Thank you, panel.
And now I would like to welcome Meredith Whitmire to the forum. Hi, Meredith. Meredith is...
Hi, sorry, just trying to get my slideshow pulled up.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Welcome. A little bit of a bio. So Meredith Ponder Whitmire is the Vice President of Mattsville and Cotto and Associates, which is an advocacy and consulting firm located in Washington, D.C. And Meredith is the Policy and Advocacy Director for the National Association of Nutrition and Aging Services Programs, as well as the Policy Director for the Elder Justice Coalition, which I understand is keeping you particularly busy today. Meredith also directs policy for the Senior Malnutrition Coalition, Defeat Malnutrition Today. And on top of all that, she is a member of ASA's Public Policy Committee. In these roles, Meredith provides policy analysis and direction for advocates on behalf of a wide variety of aging topics like nutrition, elder justice, and community-based services. So Meredith, you're going to be talking with us today about effective advocacy strategies. So everyone in the audience, get your questions about Hitting the Hill or your local offices ready for Meredith. Meredith, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. And yes, Hitting the Hill is looking a little different these days, as I'll talk about. But here, let me pull up my slides to share. How's that looking for folks?
Looks great.
All right. So a little bit more personal information about me. So I'm actually a registered lobbyist, which is a term that I know some folks are like, ooh, a lobbyist, but I promise I lobby on behalf of good things, as Leanne was saying. I've been a professional advocate / lobbyist for almost 10 years now and managed policy for the organizations that Leanne was talking about. And I am currently on the ASA Public Policy Committee. And I would say I'm an avid policy nerd in my personal life as well. Always checking out the news and rarely watching cable news, though. That's kind of a lot more opinion-based than actual fact, but love to debate policy with my friends, and that's kind of a big DC thing around here. So parties are very boring. So I'm here to explain the basics of the how and to persuade you a little bit on why you should be advocating. I will be covering advocacy versus lobbying, which I know is a concern that some folks have. Advocacy tactics, methods, and why it's important. I'm going to give you a real life advocacy challenge, as Leanne alluded to, and I am also here to answer your question. So I think it's important for folks to know that from an organizational perspective, there's the difference between advocacy versus lobbying. However, just so all of you are aware, individuals who are expressing opinions to their personal legislators are not technically lobbying for tax purposes. So if you are not speaking on behalf of your organization, if you're speaking on behalf of yourself, you are not actually lobbying, even if you're, like, even if you were doing it as an organization, it would fall under the definition of lobbying. So FYI, if you're writing letters or et cetera on behalf of yourself, you are completely in the clear. But in simple terms, advocacy is raising your voice and opining on a cause, idea, or policy, and there's no limit to the amount of advocacy your organization can do. But lobbying is an attempt to influence specific legislation, whether that's federal or state legislation or county or local ordinances. All of that counts. It's not just talking to Congress. And then the question is, well, how much lobbying is too much? Could I lose my 501c3 status? And according to the IRS, 501c3s may lobby as an insubstantial part of their activities. So, if you're a service organization, chances are you are not, lobbying as like 90% of what you're doing. So if that's the case, you're probably fine. But always love to say, as someone who went to law school, you probably want to discuss this with a local attorney if you are really, really concerned. I'm not your attorney, so try not to give legal advice here, but chances are you're probably fine is what I'm trying to say. So the difference, advocacy is writing an article, for example, or speaking about an issue that does not reflect a view on actual legislation. Just, this issue, say ageism, is very important, and here's why. Or if you have a monthly newsletter for your organization, and there's an opinion piece that reflects a view on these bills, but does not include any kind of call to action for the reader. So does not say, hey, so tell your senators to do X. Lobbying is an article that states an opinion and it encourages the readers to reach out to their senators or representatives or local folks or whatever. So that is grassroots lobbying, and that is actually lobbying. So just so that we are all aware, but I will be talking about advocacy in this presentation kind of interchangeably. So, so some of what I'll talk about is technically lobbying, but we're just going to go with advocacy as a catch-all term today. So the most important thing you do before you start is figure out, what are you asking for? What is the ask? What do you want your legislator, whether that's federal, state, local, to do? Do you want them to take a specific action, or are you trying to get them just to learn more about your issue? Or both, but typically it's kind of one or the other, the lobbying front versus the advocacy front. But then you need to have the why in order to help persuade them. How would this impact the lives of their constituents? Whether that's positive, hey, vote for this legislation, or whether that's negative, hey, this new tax or this new ordinance would really harm, older adults. And here's why. Those are both, things that are pretty necessary when you're coming up with your messaging strategy. So there's quite a few methods these days for contacting your lawmakers, whether that's in writing, social media, calling, visiting offices, or testifying. And there's probably more than that, but those are just kind of the catch-all categories I'm using today. So for written messages, I would say that anything electronic is your pick if this is an urgent issue. If this is something that, is pending for a vote now, or if this is something that is, a very current ask, something like sending an email or sending a letter via PDF in an email, or filling out the website form that most legislators will have, particularly at the federal and state levels. That's what this works well for. Mailed letters are great, but given both the post office and also at the federal level security issues, they can take a while to get there. So, it can take a couple of weeks before anything is seen by your congressman, for example. And in that case, chances are the issue is more urgent than that. But no matter how you do it, you want to be precise and concise and make your message clear. I say here, use statistics and or personalize it. The and is probably the best. Providing actual data, numbers, but also providing anecdotes. Both of those work really, really well. Particularly if you can point to real life anecdotes about, what is happening in your city, your district, your state, So those are important things to include in written messages.
Meredith, quick question from the
Sure.
audience, if I might.
Sure.
We have an attendee asking whether or not legislators themselves actually read messages.
I think it depends on the level of government. A senator chances are is not going to sit down and read all of their, emails, letters, etc. However, they have staff, and the staff read these, and the staff summarize them, and the staff will present these concerns. And frankly, as terrifying as it might sound, on the federal level, the staff is typically responsible for doing the heavy lifting on writing legislation and, presenting concerns of constituents to the congressman or senator. So, getting it, as I'll talk about with visits, getting in with the staff is really your key. Having basically, they all have issue areas they're responsible for. So you might have like a healthcare staffer or an education staffer, and they're going to be the subject matter experts. There's no way that any legislator is going to be a subject matter expert on everything. So you want to persuade the folks who are doing the persuading, if you will. On the local and state levels, it's definitely, especially the local level, a lot more likely that the actual lawmaker is going to read what you're saying. So, you should always address things to the lawmaker, but just know that it varies by level typically.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. So social media, this could be an entire presentation and then some. Like this could be an entire week of presentations. But just for some really quick tips, I would say that you should typically use a more professional account if you're going to be using Facebook or Twitter versus something that is highly personal. But there are always exceptions, particularly if you're not commenting on behalf of an organization, if you're just commenting as an individual, and also if you're commenting on an intensely personal issue. So aging is an intensely personal issue to most of us, and having an account that reflects that is not, that's not a bad thing at all. You want to make sure that a random person stumbling across your Facebook or Twitter account is not going to go, oh wow, so you want them to wow in a positive way. If you're just getting started, you want to follow organizations and elected officials you care about. The big question I always get is Facebook. Should I use Twitter? Should I use LinkedIn? Should I use Instagram? Should I use these other platforms that keep popping up like TikTok, etc.? I would say if you're contacting lawmakers, typically Facebook or Twitter, and even more generally Twitter for elected officials. LinkedIn is great for calls to action for your network. So that's a good place to put that. And other platforms are not nearly as popular, particularly among federal legislators. So, for example, some congressmen and women and some senators have Instagram accounts, but they're not checking for policy stuff. They're using those for press photos. So I would recommend using hashtags and @mentions. So, you're tweeting at somebody, you're not just tweeting into the void. and, using language that is concise and effective, again, to get people to see your posts or tweets. And honestly, it is effective to retweet what someone else is saying, to amplify it, or to repost it on Facebook, to share it, using issue toolkits that organizations put out there, sample posts. That's also very effective, because typically those will have the good hashtags, they can be part of a campaign. Calling, best for immediate issues that can be distilled to a short message. So this is not something you're having an informational visit about. You call the office, ask to speak to the aide who's handling the issue, or you can ask to speak to the lawmaker if you're talking to somebody state or local. They may refer you to an aide anyway, but just tell them you're a constituent and why you care about this. Are you a service organization, et cetera? Be brief, be timely. And if you're talking about the federal level, you might want to consider calling the local office, so a district or state office, because the national offices are getting all kinds of phone calls all the time. Visiting offices, highly recommended, but as the graphic here shows, and as we all know, they look a little different these days. Chances are it's going to be a Zoom meeting or a conference call. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. It really allows for folks to attend meetings who might not ever have the resources to come to DC, or might not have the resources to take time off work, to visit offices. It's a lot easier. And, it's a good way to get actual older adults, for example, into these meetings. It's very effective if they're hearing directly from constituents that will be affected. So the how-tos, again, being concise, telling a story, leave your information, make sure that they actually have your email address. Very important. Thank them, follow up, etc. So testifying is the last one. It's kind of an advanced strategy. And typically you'd need a pre-existing relationship with your legislator or staff if you're going to be doing that at the federal or state level. But at the local level, it's a good idea. Show up at your county board meetings, show up at your committee meetings and talk about the issues and make some kind of ask, It's a good way to connect with local community leaders. That also, loosely defining testifying, that could also include showing up at congressional town halls or teletown halls and making comments. So there are ways to do it beyond I'm sitting in a formal, Senate committee room. That you can reach out that way as well. So some reasons advocacy matters. I think it can make a difference in policy outcomes and move important issues to the forefront. Importantly, it deepens the understanding of issues by elected officials. As I said, they're not going to be subject matter experts on everything. We are responsible for informing them. 4 and 5 kind of tie together, elevating the voices of those we represent, whether that's, if you work directly with older adults or whether you care about the issue, you're able to put a face to it. And, it's important to speak for those who might not be able to speak for themselves. If in-person visits to DC resume and someone can't travel, it's important to have a voice there advocating for them. So, I would say that these days it's easier than ever to actually get, in front of staff, et cetera, in a virtual way, and that's great as far as increasing accessibility. Advocacy is adaptable and complements all of our day-to-day work. It serves to make the value proposition for all the services provided. And then 9 and 10, it can be personally rewarding and it can be fun. If you like to read the news, if you like to watch C-SPAN, if you tune into your local Nextdoor and listservs and all of that, chances are you are informed enough to be an advocate. So it's better to be at the table than on the table. It's not a one and done event. And it's about being constant and working together, not being late to the game. And there is no such thing as too much advocacy. And I have a quick call to action here. The House Build Back Better bill, which is that budget reconciliation bill that they've been talking about for months now, the big one with paid leave, et cetera, home and community-based services funding. It also includes funding over $4 billion for the Elder Justice Act program. So that's APS, long-term care ombudsman, nursing home staffing, social isolation prevention. But we've learned very recently, this funding might be in danger in the Senate. We know that Build Back Better is going to be passed just by Democrats. No Republican is going to vote for it. So in that context, because typically I encourage folks to reach out in a bipartisan manner, but knowing this context, if either or both of your senators are Democrats, please urge them, this is a phone call thing, I think, to contact Majority Leader Schumer and Senate Finance Committee Chairman Wyden to urge that the Senate bill contain $4.2 billion for elder justice. You can call the Capitol Switchboard if you don't already know folks in your members' offices. They will connect you, and please, please, please consider doing that. So I also have some other links and resources, but I know that time is running short, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and talk to Leanne and see if there are questions.
Thank you so much, Meredith. That was great. So yes, please.
Yeah, let me copy and paste that into the chat. I just saw that question.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And if you're willing to share the slides, Meredith, we can also attach them to the event today.
Yes, I am happy to do so. And since I added that one update to the slide, you all will need a new copy. So
that's great. We'll get that from you. I'm curious, anyone in the audience, if you've hit stumbling blocks in your advocacy efforts.
Yeah. Let me just get this. I was on a webinar. Okay.
Oh,
all right. So I think what it is
someone popped off mute. If anyone would like to drop anything in the chat, any barriers you've hit in your own advocacy efforts, any questions you have for Meredith about, advice for messaging, or any thoughts that you have about applying what we've been talking about all week long, reframing aging, untangling ableism and ageism, put that in the chat too, just if you have any ideas about how to apply what we've been talking about to the context of local advocacy, that would be great. But Meredith, one question for you. While we're waiting, you talked several times about, and your first step, in fact, was figure out your ask, and then figure out who to ask it to. Could you talk a little bit about what's in and out of bounds, when you're showing up at a council meeting locally, or when you're calling your state representatives? What's too big of an ask or an out of scope ask, and what is in scope?
That is a good question. Honestly, make sure it's something that person has the power to do something about. You can't, I don't think any of you would do this, but you can't contact your county board member and say, hey, we need a national policy to combat ageism. That's, they don't have the power to do that. Maybe at the state level, your governor could advocate for, a national plan, and definitely, your federal folks could, but, you want to make sure that it's within scope for the power and jurisdiction that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. Any differences in messaging strategies for when you're talking to a local official versus a state versus a, senator?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I don't know that there's a huge amount of difference as far as you want to be respectful both of their time and of them, even if you don't necessarily agree with their political views on something. And, just make sure that you have that ask, because especially if you're talking to a legislator directly, they really, really want, to know, well, what can I do about this? What do you want me to do about this?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really key.
Yeah. Yeah. Any advice? Someone commented that elected officials aren't invested, and so they're not open to meeting with us. Someone is sharing their experience. Do you have any advice for, moving that needle a little bit to get elected officials to care about things that we know they should care about, but maybe they aren't invested in?
That is the most frustrating part of my job, to be honest. It's tough. I would say that definitely work with their staff. You've got to get in with the staff. And, you also, I think part of it too, if you do manage to get that meeting, or if you do send an email or make a call, make sure that you're tailoring it to what they care about. So, for example, if you have a very, conservative lawmaker who really cares about, the debt or spending and how we're spending too much money, you might say, well, these programs that I care about are an investment, that they will save money in the long run. So, you've got to figure out how to work around what their preconceived notions are, basically. And that's easier said than done, I know.
Another comment, in local advocacy, we find the local elected sympathetic, but not all staff is supportive. The focus by them is racial equity to the exclusion of other groups. Is this a timely imperative that will change over time? How can we help electeds help staff become more inclusive in perspective?
That's very interesting, and something that I have not really seen happen before. Typically it's that sounds like a pretty individual issue, but speaking more broadly, getting an elected to get their staff to care, that we've encountered that before, actually, at the federal level, where the senators said, oh yeah, adult protective services, that's a really important program, we need to do something about it. And then the staff members like, no, we don't need to fund that. It's really hard to break through that. I don't have a good answer for that one.
Yeah. Well, let me ask it this way. In general, when you encounter, let's say you're in the door, let's say, we've cleared the first hurdle that they're willing to receive or read the message or let you in, but there's still resistance. You still encounter resistance. Any tips or strategies for navigating that resistance?
I think part of it is persistence.
Persistence.
And figuring out ways to frame the argument and make it personal. There's definitely there's a comment in the chat that says that, when the advocate is helping the Alzheimer's Association with their advocacy day at the Texas Capitol, they find that if asking if the aide or staffer has impacted by the issue helps move the discussion. That is very true. Especially if you're talking about, anybody, but at the federal level, you have a lot of young staffers, like fresh out of college, young staffers. And, they might not have any idea what it's like to experience, ageism or whatever, but their parents or their grandparents, in some cases, may be receiving Meals on Wheels, or might be getting services from a local senior center, or might be dealing with employment discrimination. So getting personal, I think, is a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I often say aging is the ultimate nonpartisan, bipartisan issue, however you want to put it. But it seems it seems like, although that I think, most of us would agree that that is true, there still is resistance, and it's not, but ageism is pervasive on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely. And, it's tough because you have a lot of, and this was mentioned earlier, a lot of older adult elected officials who don't necessarily even think about themselves as, hey, I'm an older adult who might be impacted by these things.
Yeah.
They, because of, I think, internalized ageism, some electeds really have an issue with that. So that's something we've got to work on, I think, as a society. That's not something any one person is going to fix.
Right.
But,
and just like all of us, they live and are part of our ageist society.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it just so happens to show up in our political discourse. Another question, is there an initiative to engage more elder advocates in offices like Blancato and Associates?
Yeah, so we, especially through the Elder Justice Coalition, we really encourage you to sign up for our mailing list, because we will send out advocacy opportunities like the, the elder justice thing I was talking about earlier. We also, if you're, for example, if you're a nutrition provider, we also work on nutrition issues, and encourage you to get in touch with me on that. We always love to have more older adults in particular doing self-advocacy. If it's possible, it's really important. And, it's important to hear the stories directly from people. So, part of the problem had been in the past that, getting folks to, congressional visits or things like that, getting folks out on the street is harder. But, with the rise of virtual meetings, which don't seem to be going away up here anytime soon anyway, it is so much easier to become an advocate. So I encourage folks to get in touch with me if you're interested.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I just want to, before we wrap, call out one comment from Clay Kempf. One thing to remember is that some local officials are on the career path of becoming state senators or assembly members. Develop a relationship with them now locally. You'll have an easy path if and when they move up to the state office.
Yes. Yes. And state moving to federal as well. Both of those are important. And frankly, they have fewer people to deal with in a lot of cases. If you're in a smaller town, for example, or, a smaller county, they may not have as many constituents, just sheer numbers wise. So, and as I think we're all starting to see, local and state elections matter. Local and state decisions matter.
Tremendously.
And, it's important to engage at all levels, not just the federal level.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Meredith. We will get your slides posted, and
yes, I will email those to you now.
Yeah. And thank you for giving us that call to action on the elder justice funding. It sounds like that's resonating with some folks. Before we close, I just want to announce to the ASA members amongst us that one new benefit of ASA membership that we're excited to talk about is a new legislative tracker. The ASA team has been working hard to identify legislative proposals introduced at the 117th Congress, which align with our 4 priority areas that I mentioned earlier: the digital divide, health equity, ageism, and fighting climate change. So this tracker makes it easy for you to find the bill, to see a brief summary, and read more by clicking on active links. So if you haven't seen it yet, ASA members log in. The PDF is in the library of the ASA Community Collective, and we'll post that information on the forum as well. Thank you everyone for joining us for day 4. Tomorrow, we're wrapping up the week with a global call to end ageism, and we'll be talking with folks from the UN, the WHO, and Help Age International. We look forward to seeing you there. And with that, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.